Good afternoon, everyone. It's Beck, and I'm here to share some insights from a welfare and wellbeing PD seminar that I recently attended. I'm going to discuss two areas in particular that I found were very relevant to our school's demographic: effects of trauma on wellbeing and mental illness or disorders. I will share some strategies to support students' wellbeing regarding these areas and provide some resources along the way for your professional learning. I'd like to begin by defining wellbeing. While often associated with health and mental wellbeing, wellbeing in general is much harder to define as it is such a broad concept across different contexts. As you can see here, all of these words have come from different definitions relating to wellbeing. After this PD, I would define wellbeing as the physical, mental, social, and emotional health of a student. For this presentation, though, we will be focusing specifically on social and emotional wellbeing. This includes their ability to successfully and confidently complete set tasks, navigate connections and meaningful relationships with others, identify and regulate emotions and be in control of their behaviours, and their overall contentedness and life satisfaction. This quote by Hamilton and Redmond supports my simple definition, but I want to draw your attention in particular to the last part of this quote. Well-being might be displayed differently depending on culture, temperament, and individual differences. This part here is why it's imperative that we teachers go back to APST1, know your students and know how they learn. Every student is going to have differences that will affect their well-being and in turn their learning. Maslow's hierarchy of needs helps us to prioritize the needs of students for their development. As you can see on the left, the basic physiological and safety needs at the bottom must be met before the other higher psychological needs can be met, including, as shown on the expanded model on the right, the cognitive needs. In other words, learning will not occur and growth will not be possible if a student's basic needs aren't met. While this mightn't be new to you, I feel that sometimes we need this reminder to take a step back, reflect on our practice, and see how we can further meet the needs of students for their development and progress. Throughout this PD, I found two areas that are especially relevant to our school. Firstly, the impact of trauma on students' wellbeing. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare recently unveiled a report detailing components of the child protection system for vulnerable children. During the 2020-21 component period, there were 121,000 cases of child maltreatment investigated. 72,700 care and protection orders were granted for victims of child abuse or neglect, and 56,900 children were in out-of-home care for protective reasons or to provide respite for parents. The report also identified the increased risk of these children being involved in the youth justice system and or homeless services. We could go into the neuroscience of trauma where the brain is shut down by the amygdala, responsible for detecting social and physical safety threats, which activates the survival mode of a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state as it stops all cognitive functions. For more information, I suggest reading Judith Howard's book, Distressed or Deliberately Defiant, or Trauma-Informed Practice in Education by Rebecca Harris. But more simply, neuroscience further confirms Maslow's theory that as basic needs are not met, as in this case of trauma-affected students, well-being and development is impaired. This intervention through child protection systems aims to meet the basic physiological and security needs, such as a safe home environment, transport, finances, and access to regular meals. The trauma-informed practices that are a key element of our school's values and practices align with the leadership and partnership elements of the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework, the ASWF, which is a valuable source of support for educators and families. As a Tier 1 intensive support level, our leadership team work with families, organisations and agencies to support student learning, safety and wellbeing. On a micro-environmental level, as teachers, we can implement a Tier 2 or 3 level of intervention through classroom factors that we can influence. Whole class check-ins using the zones of regulation, following up with questions to ensure their basic needs are met. Tier 2 intervention would focus on checking in with students specific students. Have you had breakfast? Who dropped you off this morning? And are there any custody issues that need to be made aware of? Sometimes we can get so caught up preparing for a day of teaching that we can miss the crucial signs that will prevent our students from learning and being successful. Just a simple check-in every morning not only identifies those unmet needs, it develops a trusting student-teacher relationship and lets the students know that they are loved and cared for, which meets the higher physical, psychological level of needs. The other factor that I wish to address affects student well-being is mental health. Firstly, I think it's important to define mental health. Based on a holistic view of a person's health, mental health refers to the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of a person. When we speak about mental health problems, we refer to the disruption of usual social and emotional well-being levels due to certain situations like change. Most of these situations can be quickly and easily resolved by using emotional skills, social skills such as resilience or communication. Mental illness or disorders, however, are referred to when diagnosable health problems consistently and significantly affect a person's ability to feel, think, behave, and interact. According to the World Health Organization, this includes depression, bipolar, anxiety, intellectual disabilities, and developmental behavioral disorders, such as autism, ADHD, and ODD, to name a few. For this presentation, while there are some issues surrounding terminology between disabilities, disorders, and illnesses, and while neurodivergent is a more student-friendly terminology, we will be referring to these as mental health disorders for the fact that we are using statistical reports and government documents. According to the Mental Health of Children and Adolescents report, which assessed 7 most common mental health disorders, including 4 anxiety disorders, major depression disorder, conduct disorder, and ADHD. In 2015, 13.9% of children between the ages of 4 and 17 had 1 or more diagnosed mental health disorders. And keep in mind, this research does not include autism diagnosis, which in 2015, the ABS estimated that 5.6% of Australian children between the ages of 5 and 14 have an autism diagnosis. All of these disorders impact friendships, family relationships, executive and cognitive functioning, affecting school attendance and academic outcomes, and psychological distress, which has increased risk of self-harm and suicidal behaviours. So as teachers, what can we do? As mentioned before, the ASWF has courses, videos, and articles to target certain areas of student wellbeing, which I encourage you to look at some stage. One key aspect of the framework under student voice raises the practice of explicitly taught social and emotional skills, aligning perfectly with CASEL's SEL framework, which outlines 5 key competencies across 4 settings. This framework, like the ASWF, relies on partnership between admin, teachers, students, and families. Introducing school-wide explicitly taught SEL lessons at the beginning of the week, sharing these with family, and then practicing these skills authentically will help students develop their emotional intelligence. I find these skills to be adaptable with the zones of regulation to assist students of all ages identify their emotions as a starting point to draw upon the skills learned in SEL lessons, particularly from the self-awareness section of this framework. For example, this could look like having a zones placard on the students' desks, which they can put a counter on to indicate which zone they are in. Just like learning is lifelong, so is social and emotional learning for us and our students. As educators, it is vital that we work together to continue our professional learning under APST 6.3 and 6.4. There are many resources linked to this presentation, so I encourage you all to dive in and engage with these valuable resources for your own personal learning. I want to encourage you all to have a good look into the Student Wellbeing Framework and the CASEL SEL Framework to discover specific practices to support individual students. Now, today's discussion has focused on student wellbeing, but I would also like to take a moment to address personal wellbeing. As teachers, we face a lot, from secondary trauma due to sharing emotional weight of students' experiences, challenging classroom behaviours, increasing workloads with curriculum, differentiation, assessments, and reporting. Teachers are at risk of burnout, with alarming rates of teachers leaving the profession altogether. As one last note, I implore you to look after yourself and those around you. Check in with your teaching partners. Speak up when the load is getting heavy. Share a laugh, a personal win, or a moment of gratitude with a friend. There are some tips shown here and links to go to for support if you should need it. As teachers, we must look after ourselves for our own happiness, fulfillment, and well-being, and also as our presence has a profound influence on our students and our families. I thank you very much for your time and take care.